Bill Zadick, just inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. You've received a lot of awards, a lot of accolades in your life, but how does this one feel?
It's pretty amazing, humbling and rewarding and honoring. It's not really something I would have thought of for myself. I'm certainly not as a young man. Maybe later on when you get to a point and people mention, "Oh, hey, you're," I was like, "Oh, yeah, maybe. Well, that's pretty cool." But when you think about what the National Wrestling Hall of Fame is and who it's inclusive of, man, they're just all my heroes are here, right? And it's pretty incredible to be talked about in that same group. So yeah, it's an amazing honor.
This class in particular has a strong USA Wrestling influence. You're going in alongside Gary Abbott and Bruce Burnett. What's that like? What's it like to be a part of a group with folks like that?
So to get an incredible honor like being inducted to the Hall of Fame is a pretty special honor in and of itself. But to go in with the class that we're going in, you always have that kind of connection, right? The class of 2020 or 2020/2021, right? And with Gary and Bruce and even Jamil Byers, right? So when I moved to the training center as a resident athlete and lived there from 2004 to 2008 for a few months, Byers and I lived right next door to each other in the dorms, and we've always had a strong connection, and just being local athletes in the area and have maintained good friends and have some similar hobbies and interests outside of wrestling. So I just have a strong connection with all of them, right? Bruce Burnett being my coach when I first was on the national team and competing at the senior level, and then a mentor and leader when he came back as the national coach, and of course Gary, my colleague now, and Gary's just, Rich always likes to talk about him as the hardest working man in wrestling, and he truly is that. So yeah, it's a special honor to go in with my colleagues and friends and even the folks that I don't know and the award winners and inductees like Mark Lieberman, getting to learn about him and special things that he's done in his life, and it's just really an amazing, incredible feeling to be honored with these men.
You're going in for your accomplishments as a wrestler and a coach, which is pretty cool. Could you talk a little bit about that and maybe also the transition from being an athlete to being a coach?
It's again humbling. I'm still coaching, and I feel like I'm very young in a coaching career still, and so a lot more to do, and to be recognized for honors on both sides. I mean, to do some of these things that these athletes are training to do, and that the men and women who are recognized in the Hall of Fame, you've strived your whole life to accomplish certain things, and it's pretty incredible to do that as an individual, right? Because it takes so many people, right? Wrestling is an individual sport. It gets called an individual sport, but it really is not, right? It takes a village, it takes a team, it takes, it's on the shoulders of giants, as people say. Your training partners, your coaches, your parents, your coaches all the way up, right? That started you the right way, that helped develop you, your college coaches. There's just so much that goes into it, and so for an individual to reach a super high accomplishment is a pretty spectacular feat, and for us to be able to do that with a group of athletes, right? 8 athletes on a team, and go win a world title was pretty phenomenal, and a very rewarding feeling in a different depth of satisfaction and gratitude that you feel as an athlete when you make a personal accomplishment. To do it with a group, it's just different, equally special, but in some senses a higher sense of reward.
So you were talking about how you feel like you're kind of at the start of your coaching career, and you've been at it for a little while, but this is your first full quad as the head coach of the team. So what's that been like?
Yeah, it's been a great experience, and I love what I do, and so I get to work with a bunch of great people and great athletes. USA Wrestling, we have a great company and a very family-oriented atmosphere, and I really feel a responsibility from the effort of everybody, people in our communications department, our finance department, our state services, our business development. Everybody's working hard for our teams, and we're working hard for our grassroots teams all the way up through our elite development onto our senior level teams. And so, it's a tremendous responsibility, but it gives me a deep sense of gratitude and joy that I can do this. I've been coaching now 11 years with USA Wrestling and worked my way up through the ranks, and I loved my other roles in this as the head coach. I've certainly enjoyed just the great people I work with, my immediate staff. Les, of course, in charge of programs in strategy, Cody Bickley, Shannon Doherty, Jamie McNabb, and then my coaching staff, Joe Russell and Kevin Jackson. Everybody's pulling on the same end of the rope, and it's a great culture. It's a great environment to work in, and they all work really hard at moving the needle the right direction, and I think that's the success of our program. And I'm just a piece of that, but it's a tremendous. It's my dream job, and I love what I'm doing.
Who have been your mentors and biggest influences to help get you where you are today?
Well, it's interesting. Of course, my father, my parents, both my parents. A lot of the intensity and drive came from my father, the toughness, the hard work, and a lot of the stability came from our mother. She's just a very grounded individual, very strong faith. She's kind of the spiritual rock of our family, but also just a picture of tranquility amidst the storm. Right? She's always joyful, always happy, always has a good thing to say about every situation, and I think the combination of those has certainly impacted our family, my siblings and I, in an incredibly positive way. And but I've had a lot of great coaches. I've had a lot of, my dad being my coach my entire life, and being in Montana a little bit in an isolated environment. Montana had good wrestling, but relatively low population, so you have to work really hard to get next level information and get to regional events and national events and training camps. And one of the things my dad did very well, he worked really hard at getting us out. And, the Campbell family, Denny Campbell and his wife Susan, they have a great wrestling family. They started a club in my hometown, North Montana Wrestling Club, that I eventually wrestled for. My dad coached for, about 30 years. And then he has 6 children, 4 sons that were great wrestlers. And the youngest being 5 years older than me, and Matt and TJ, the 2 younger, were both 4-time state champs in Montana. Tom and Fritz were also state champions in Montana. And then Carmen and Aaron, their daughters. They just were a great family, people that we looked up to, impacted all of us. There's great friends to this day. Matt, when I was between my 8th grade and freshman year, Matt was training for, he was going to enter the Marines. So he was getting ready for his basic training commitment, or boot camp commitment. And I was getting ready to, make the jump to the high school level, right? And so I was training with Matt every day. And this guy's a grown man, and he was, a D1 college wrestler and like a stud, right? And 4-time state champ. And that was a very formative time, I learned how to be tough because he wasn't taking it easy on me. And he was not that much bigger than me. Matt's a little guy, but maybe one of the most explosive, quick, and technical wrestlers. He and TJ were just phenomenal. And then, TJ was closer to my age and more like an older brother than anything. And TJ set the standard for what I wanted to be as a wrestler. I wanted to be TJ Campbell. So, and still do. He was a phenomenal wrestler. He just was so good, so technical. He had fun when he was out there. He made it look fun. And he was the guy, most all of us, we had a very tight-knit group of pretty successful wrestlers that stems from his older brothers and the Sprague family in Oregon, down to, you know, my brother kind of being the youngest of that generation of that crew. Yeah, TJ set the standard. He was the guy we were all chasing. Justin Abdu, his whole family. Yeah, incredible. Mark and Alfie Sprague and their family. Mark and they have 6 kids also, 4 girls, 2 boys, and Marky and Matt were great wrestlers, and they just had a huge impact on my life. Mark Sprague's a visionary in developmental wrestling, never wrestled a match in his life, and just was a tremendous innovator and thinker, really good, successful businessman, and he applied his business knowledge to the wrestling world, and having learned wrestling in a different avenue than most of us coming up competing, he didn't get involved until his older son started wrestling, and he just was light years ahead of his time. Floyd Vaughn coached me since I was 5 years old. Floyd lived in Hawaii, and he would fly back and forth from Hawaii to the mainland, and he'd basically fly in the spring, and then he'd stay through all the summer, come in probably early March, and then he'd stay through all the summer wrestling. And Floyd just was maybe one of the best developmental coaches I'd ever been around. And even to this day, he and Mark Sprague just kind of set the standard that, Floyd, they're just doing things the right way. Not only doing well and winning, but it was very process-oriented. And my dad was that way, Denny Campbell was that way. Everybody wanted to win. We all wanted to win. Everybody expected to win every match, every time. But there was a standard and a process that you were expected to maintain that was even higher value than what the performance, what the achievement, right? It was more, I would say, performance and process-oriented than, and when I say performance, I'm not talking about the middle. I'm talking about what you're actually doing. How are you performing in your training, in your competition, in your daily life? So I think that really, those gentlemen, Jabby Young, Janie Young, their family, their 3 sons that Mike and I grew up wrestling with. Jabby was just a best friend to my dad, a best coaching friend. His sons and Mike and I all wrestled together basically our whole lives. Bobby, Dustin, and Jesse were all great wrestlers, all wrestled at D1 college. And Jabby and Janie just provided a lot of inspiration, super upbeat, positive, hopeful people that have just been there for our entire family for forever. And literally to the point where Jabby was a marathon runner. So he was in the National Guard, and he ran, quote unquote recreationally, started running for fitness and whatever, enjoyment, and got very competitive where he's on the Air Guard national team for like 25 years. And one of the fastest guys in the National Guard in the whole country, and still runs today. He's in his 70s and is still running. Today I already talked to him this morning about the pavement. He got 5 miles in this morning. I'm just like, this guy's, he's amazing, right? He's been doing that since we met. I remember the time I was making weight at a tournament when I was a freshman, and I was having trouble. I wrestled my semi or quarterfinal match, and had semis the next morning. I had to make weight that night. And Jabby's in there pedaling the bike, and he's actually pumping my legs while I was on the bike, trying to help me make weight, and we got it done. So all these folks have just impacted me in such a magnificent way. And then of course in college, Coach Gable, it's almost like you don't even start talking about Coach Gable because there's just too much to be said. The greatest coach of all time in any sport, bar none. He just had an incredible image and aura about him as a competitor, and he parlayed that into his coaching career. And by the time I came to the Iowa program, I feel like it was the best time in the history of Iowa to be in that program. And we had our ups and downs, but it was a powerful experience for me to witness how he moved through those, in the 13 years I was in Iowa, the 9 I was there with Coach Gable before he retired and Jim Zaleski took over. But we won, of the 9 years, we won 8 of the national titles. So even after I was graduated, and Gable won. He coached 1 year after I graduated, won another title, set the record, right? Had 6 in the finals, 5 champs, scored 170 points. I mean, just blew it out of the water, right? And so all of these people have impacted me in such a powerful way that I literally think about every single one of them. Gene and Francis Davis, Gene Davis, is an inductee, Hall of Fame inductee, 2-time Olympian, NCAA champion for Oklahoma State, and also a 4-time state champ for Montana. He was the first 4-timer. So it's kind of a cool connection that we have in our career paths. And he was at the first camp that I was ever at when I was 5 years old, and I'm fortunate to live in Colorado Springs, and he and his wife live in that community. And besides being a great wrestling mind, he's really become more of a spiritual mentor and coach for me, and just amazing individual. But when I think about this, just a couple weeks ago, we were in Alpharetta, Georgia, at our Olympic team training camp, and our Greco team leader, John Bartis, brought a bunch of mentors in, right? And they're specifically there to work with the Greco team, but we all had a chance to interact and talk with them. And so I had a lot of conversations with Coach Robinson. And so Jay Robinson and I, in between workouts, and he and Joe Russell obviously have a strong connection. I just had a lot of time to, pick his brain, ask questions, talk with him. We've had him out to Colorado to talk to our teams a few times. And he said an interesting statement that I thought really applied to me. He said, I'm not real smart, but I can take what other people do well and duplicate that, right, and apply it to my situation. And I feel like that's one of the things that I've been able to do that's created success, in my endeavors. Is I don't know that I'm terribly innovative, but I mean, we all strive to be innovative in our careers, and especially in wrestling, right? There's a lot of opportunity for creativity. But all of the people that I've talked about have impacted me in a great way. In the things that worked really well, I've tried to continue. I've tried to, just pass that legacy of what they've done, and maybe some of them got it from somewhere else too, right? But it's just it's been a very joyful, fun thing, and I'm still going. And see how far it goes.
So you've got a laundry list of accomplishments: world champ, coaching a world championship team, Olympic coach of the year. What are some of the more maybe mundane wrestling experiences that have stuck with you throughout the years that you're never going to forget? It might not be standing on top of the podium, but made you who you are.
No, the top of the podium, the moment is a fun moment, right? Mm-hmm. But that moment was created by all of these things that you're asking about, right? These mundane moments. And so I think back to, like I talked about, the intensity and toughness that my dad bred into all of his athletes, right? So not just Mike and I, but all of the friends that we have in the Montana wrestling community, they all have a tremendous love for my father because he instilled confidence and belief in them in a young age, right? That they've taken on beyond wrestling to do wonderful things. And so you think about those hard moments, right? And that's where it really is. everybody knows it's a test, but in that moment, what is happening is you're being pushed maybe sometimes in a physical sense, or you're pushing yourself in a physical sense, but it's not just physical, it's emotional, right? And you get to a point where you're struggling to overcome or to move forward or to adjust to this resistance. And in that moment, you have to make that choice. You have to, right? So my father, he put me in the opportunity to make that choice. And Mark Sprague did that for me as well. And Denny Campbell, and Floyd Vaughn, and Coach Gable, and Coach Burnett, Coach Traction when they were my national coaches. And so I think about like those long road trips as a young kid. When, you know, I said we had to work really hard to get next level information, right? My dad was a car dealer. We'd borrow a brand new van off the lot, and we'd drive. We put 30,000 miles on a van in like 2 or 3 months, you know, and just hit all the regionals and all the events and the AAU stuff, the USAW stuff. Everywhere there was good wrestling, we would go find it and try to, you know. So you think about that stuff. I think about the music that we played in the van, you know, like the mundane stuff. My coach Floyd, and he and Matt Campbell were driving the van. Was 6 or 8 of us. Matt Floyd driving, TJ Campbell, myself, Justin Abdu. My brother wasn't old enough probably to be on that trip yet. A couple other guys from Montana. And we listened to like George Thorogood and the Destroyers. We listened to the Doobie Brothers. We listened to the Cars a little bit. We listened to the Cars more when we were at training camp in Portland, at Mark Sprague's camp, USA Oregon, which is the Cobra logo. But I remember that stuff. Like if you play the Cars right now, or you play George Thorogood, or even the Doobie Brothers, I could probably sing along with every single song, just because it's like that mundane, like it's just over and over and over. But yeah, we had a lot of fun. We almost burned down the campus in Anaheim, California once, or Antioch. It was in Antioch, California, at a USA Wrestling Western Regionals. 2 of our guys had gotten beat out of the tournament. They were out in the parking lot having a Roman candle. Driving through Wyoming, fireworks stands are open year-round, so we had stopped, of course, and loaded up. And they're out in the van having a fireworks fight, shooting Roman candles at each other. And, like, we're parked right next to this little, you know, landscaped area that had a big pine tree, and it was a really hot, dry year. And, you know, one guy shoots the other guy, he dodges it, it lands in the pine needles, whoosh, and it essentially burns down this really nice pine tree. And, you know, just funny stuff, like millions of stories like that, you know, when you think back, it's the mundane, to get back to your question, the mundane things that you're doing, but are really formative, right? Really formative. And they make the hard stuff, you know. We would train hard at camps, you know. Sometimes we did a training camp that we were there from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. with a 1-hour break for lunch. And essentially every hour you rotated. So you had a 5 or 10 minute little break in between, about a 1-hour technique session, 50-minute techniques, whatever. And that's hard, right? It's not an easy thing to do, but you're doing that amidst all these other experiences, right? We were water skiing at night, fishing on the Columbia River, and camping on the day off, or going, you know, in Portland, you know, they had this huge fireworks display, and the camp was always over the 4th of July weekend. So we'd go down and watch the fireworks, and you could see Mount St. Helens, you know, puffing smoke off in the distance in Washington. And so all of that stuff.
Last question I've got for you. How old were you when you realized that you wanted wrestling to be your career and you know, make your life around the sport?
Yeah, pretty young. You know, my dad was really passionate about wrestling, and so I started when I was 5 competing, 5, 6, and I'd probably been wrestling around in the house a year or two before that with my dad. And so I knew it was a very important thing to him. And like all young kids, kind of want to tag along and do what your dad does. And so when I got into it, I knew it wasn't something I was doing lightly. And I started having success pretty early, and I was really enjoying it. And so I would say by the time I was 8 years old, I was like, well, I knew what the World Championships were. I knew what the Olympic Games were. I knew that's like the apex of our sport. And I started thinking about it at that age, and I just knew I wanted to do it as well as I could. And so pretty early on.
Well, congratulations, Bill. Thank you for everything you've done for the sport, and continue to do for the sport. And looking forward to hopefully a very long and successful coaching career for Team USA.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.